I have one question. What do General Motors, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, and the Titanic all have in common? Well, as it turns out, they have one thing in common: that valuable information that could have prevented crises in each of these enterprises was withheld. Now, we studied these organizations, and we've studied others. As a matter of fact, we studied 16 other organizations and hundreds of senior-level leaders like yourselves, because we wanted to know, what was it that caused information from being willfully withheld? What were the causes of this withholding? And what were the consequences of this withholding? So you might be asking, well, what does this have to do with me? I'm a senior leader in my organization, and I don't really know what this has to do with me. Well, the fact is that your employees may be withholding valuable information, and unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, the reason could very well be you. Now, what our research found was that the #1 cause of employees withholding valuable work-related information were broken communications and broken relationships with their leaders. Now, what caused broken relationships? The #1 cause was egregious or aggressive leadership practices. We have dubbed this phenomenon culture of silence. We call it, in the vernacular, corporate silence. And our premise is we're setting out to talk to you about this phenomenon so that you understand it, so that you can recognize the signs of silence and do something about it before, God forbid, it's too late. Willful withholding of work-related information. It's either offensive or it's defensive. So offensive works like this: you've done something to me, and therefore, I'm not going to give anything back to you. For example, one senior leader, an IT executive in our study, made a proposition to her leader and said, listen, we've got this IT problem, an implementation issue. I know what the solution is. It's X, Y, and Z. Her leader said, that is fantastic. I'd like you to write it up and give it to me. Great, so she writes it up, she gives it to her leader. Lo and behold, at the next all-hands-on-deck meeting, hundreds of people in the IT community, her leader gets up on stage like this, presents the problem, and presents the solution. Whose solution was it? It was the respondent. It was our study participant. So we said, well, what was your reaction? She said, in that moment, I decided that she would never, ever, ever get another idea from me ever again. We call that offensive silence. Defensive silence is when there's massive organizational jolt. For example, a new CEO or a new president or a new senior vice president comes in and makes blanket changes, and everybody keeps cover. They shut down and they say, the only way to stay safe in this organization is for me to keep my mouth shut. How do we change this? Well, in our study, we looked at organizations where leaders believe something fundamentally different, where there are cultures of voice, compared to companies where there are cultures of silence. In cultures of voice, we see leaders behaving in ways that give associates in the associate culture voice merit. You have a voice, and your voice has meaning, and we want you to speak. As a matter of fact, we've proposed a rule for leaders who are trying to build strong cultures of silence. It's called the 20-80 rule, and the 20-80 rule says this. It says, keep your mouth closed. If you're a senior leader, you're the boss. You have the power of the pulpit. Listen and learn and draw people out 80% of the time, and talk and tell 20% of the time. This is an example of high-influence leadership. High-influence leadership practices, they stimulate and encourage voice, they shape cultures of voice, and they eliminate or minimize silence. Second, they fundamentally believe in their head that everybody has the ability to participate and contribute in ways that are equal or greater to their current demonstration. They believe that they should encourage people to grow and learn in their current jobs. And they believe that they play a major role in encouraging voice. They also know that they don't know everything. This we refer to as learning orientation. And there are two opposite polar ends of the learning orientation, and I want you to consider this. One is the judge, and the judge says, look, I'm an SVP, I'm an EVP, I got to where I am because I know just about everything. That mindset, I know everything, translates to your associate culture. They know that you have that mindset. And as a result, what do? Are they willing to contribute more, or do they just watch and wait and see how much you're willing to encourage and to prove that their voice has merit? The opposite end of that learning orientation is what we call the learner. And the learner says, I don't know everything. The learner says, I have everything to know. So, are you a high influence leader? Are you creating a culture of voice, or are you eliciting silence? Now, we have a few ways to give you a hint. And I want to start with just a few questions. Number one, in how many staff meetings have you been in the last 3 months where you've asked for input from your folks and you get BS? And I don't mean that BS. I mean the bovine stare. And the bovine stare is when you ask a question for input and your folks look at you like this. Nothing. You get nothing. What's your tolerance for silence? 5 seconds, 7 seconds, seems like an eternity. But you'll probably just jump right in and move along. We don't like silence. It's very uncomfortable. I get that. Within the last 2 weeks, how many employees came to you or disagreed with you in an open group setting? Third, how many half-baked ideas did you hear from your associates that you wished would die on the vine? How many times in the last 3 months with your associates, especially your direct reports, have you played devil's advocate? Devil's advocate is a way to tear down input from your direct reports, which is a driver of silence. And if that's what you're after, you go ahead and knock yourself out. If you and your boss want to play that game, go to it. Go, play, do devil's advocate. But think twice the next time you do it. And rather than tear down an idea, try building it up. And see the difference you get in the contribution and the voice you get from your employees. So the answers to all of those questions may indicate the extent to which you're eliciting silence in your organization or encouraging voice. And we say high-influence leadership practices may not be easy, but they are absolutely possible. One meeting at a time, one interaction at a time, you can do it. I just want you to try one thing, that one thing. Next time you're in a staff meeting, try that 20-80 rule, and you track whether or not you hear more from your associates than you thought you ever would. A culture of voice is possible. A culture of silence should be intolerable to every one of you in this room. It's too risky. It's too dangerous. And in this day and age, when knowledge has to move at lightning speed to maintain your competitive advantage, none of us can afford to in any way tolerate a culture of silence. Create your next leadership legend. Go create and contribute to a culture of voice. Thank you.